welcome to another episode of Keeping Up the Conversation. I am your host, Miss Tori, and that guy about, I don't know, 300 miles away from me is my co-host, Big Ken. Oh, wait, you know what? I always forget this. I don't know why I forget this because this is like the thing, it's like the most popular thing in the world.
Mhm.
KUTC Live is presented by Black Live Magazine.
Okay.
I
Most
always
definitely.
forget that, I don't know why I forget that because that's like my thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you gotta toot your own horn
I
sometimes because
know, and
your own
it's
magazine is a big deal. It's kind of a
I
big
know, it is, and it's been a long journey. And it's right here on the screen, and I just skip over those 2 words, Black Line Magazine. I skip it over. I don't know. So, before we were coming on the air, I was looking at our intro, and I haven't seen it in a month because we take a month off in between seasons. And season 4, I got butterflies. I haven't had those in a long time. I got
butterfly.
butterflies in my belly. But so, yeah, anyway, I'm glad we are in season 4. Looking forward to all the guests that are going to be on the show. Definitely always looking forward to the crazy antics that my co-host brings to the show. Or is that me? Do I
Ooh,
bring the
you
crazy
say,
antics?
yeah, that's you on the crazy antics, not
Oh,
me.
yeah, that's me. I totally forgot. Okay. So anyway, we always start the top of the hour with our hot topics. And so normally I'm not into like this white person, black person thing. That's just not something that we really do on the show. But I just found this first hot topic really interesting because Reverend Al Sharpton and Ben Crump, they're taking on their first case involving a white person who was killed after being shot during an encounter with a police officer. Now, the civil rights leader and the high-profile attorney who Sharpton dubbed Black America's Attorney General deemed the police shooting of 17-year-old Hunter Britton one of the most significant cases in the fight to push Congress for landmark police reform legislation. Attorneys Crump and Devin Jacob, along with Sharpton and representatives from the NAACP, were invited to attend Britton's memorial. I believe this was last Tuesday. No, like last Tuesday. How long ago was that? Anyway, he was fatally shot on June 23rd. And uh, by a deputy. He was shot during a traffic stop by a deputy around 3 a.m. outside a local auto repair shop along Arkansas Highway. Um, and so initially, the officer he was put on leave, and but since then he has been terminated. Now, the significance of the story is not because is Reverend Al Sharpton and the attorney. It's the fact that the police officer did not turn on his body cam. And so as a result, there's no footage of the shooting that exists. And so um, it's kind of unfortunate, and it's just,
Crazy.
yeah. And it's, I think another significance in this case or this situation is that it's being kind of it's being overseen sort of by the NAACP after a young white man was shot. So it's kind of it's I don't know if that's history. I don't think it's history. I don't think it's groundbreaking. It's just it was really interesting to me because it's the first time that I've ever heard of this. Have you heard of anything like this happening with the NAACP?
No, but when I look at this type of situation, I just look at things like this. Some of this stuff is wrong is wrong. So,
Right.
when you have people that are in situations like this, like, Al Sharpton and the guys around him, they represent people who are in these positions, what I'm saying, too often. So, they're pretty familiar with the way things go and the proceedings behind it. So, they're kind of like the expert on this type of thing.
Right.
So, I'm pretty sure that played in the part of why they are there and why they are, involved in this case.
Yeah. And it's as with any shooting, it's a tragedy, but this one is more I'm not gonna put like any weight on it, but just for lack of a better word, I think it's more, uh, it's just more tragic because again, it's an officer involved shooting. And it's just something that the community, society, the nation does not need right now. But, so I wanted to kind of bring that up. It's not like I'm not looking at a black or white thing. It's just one of those situations where I found that it was very, very interesting because it was NAACP and because the officer did not turn on his body cam, just kind of, I
Yeah.
don't know.
That's that's gonna be a big issue.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of having the body cam. And I understand, if you have to turn it on and off and things of that nature, maybe human nature you might forget. But like we talked about before with the training of these officers, I think that's the biggest piece that some of these
Right.
officers are not being trained properly,
Mhm.
so they don't handle situations properly and they don't go through the procedures that they need to go through. So.
Yep, you're exactly right. And then just real quick in terms of training, this is one of those situations again that's going to be, I feel, that's going to be part of training police officers. Their list is getting long. So anyway, on a lighter note, Jada Pinkett Smith, she has a new look for the summer. The Red Table host shaved her head, and she credited her 20-year-old daughter Willow Smith for encouraging her to make the change. She said, "Willow made me do it because it was time to let go." But she's about to be 50 and she still looks divinely, like she said, divinely lit. She turns 50 in September. And there's another picture of her daughter, Willow Smith, who was sporting the same kind of matching buzz of her own.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I love the fact that she called her mother divine. And so I mean, social media was all a buzz in with all positive thoughts of her shaved head.
I mean,
So yeah,
for her, she can pull that off because she's such
mhm.
a beautiful woman. Uh,
Right, exactly,
but I
yeah.
saw her head is shaped, pretty well,
Perfectly round.
and so she can pull that off. And hey, listen, women, don't go trying that.
Yeah.
You can try the bald head thing. I got a bald head under this hat, so I'm an expert. So I'm just saying, not everybody can pull that off with a buzz cut because some people's head are not shaped. Your mom
Right.
head right when you was a baby. And
And some people don't know the shape of their
everybody.
head.
Yeah,
Some people don't when you cut, you're like, "Oh man, you got some craters in your head, you got some indentions, it's not gonna work."
I mean, that could be the case. So, but
Yeah.
I respect her for doing that,
Mhm.
stepping out and doing something different. And her daughter and her son are definitely, kids who definitely, are far out there as far as what they're willing to do and what they're willing to try and being totally different. And
Yeah.
you can only just applaud that because in this world
Oh,
of
yeah.
cutter type of people and just the same thing over and over again, people who are willing to step out and do something different. That's
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with you, kinda piggyback on your, kudos, but anyway, kudos to her, and you did that, Jada Pinkett Smith. So, you know what time it is? It is time for Fun Facts with Big Ken. What you got for us today?
Well,
Okay.
something interesting for y'all today. Have you ever heard of the saying, "When in Rome, do as the Romans do"?
Sure
Did it ever
have.
did it ever cross your mind though to say which Rome? Because most people don't think about which Rome, right? There are multiple Romes. Um, when you think about Rome, you think about the movies, the Roman Empire, the capital of Italy. That's Rome, right? I put some pictures. I got some pictures just to show you a couple of examples.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
That's the Rome that we think of. That's the Rome that we think of. Like this Rome, these beautiful Italian architecture and things of that nature. So those are the type of things that we think about, right? But did you know there are 25 places in the world named Rome?
Oh my gosh.
25 other places. Like we have a Rome, New York. Did you know there was a Rome, New York?
I didn't know there was a Rome. I think there's a Rome, Texas. Am I
Oh,
right?
nope, there's a Paris, Texas, and the
Oh, Paris, Texas.
what
Okay.
prompted me to
Okay.
get here because I thought about the Paris thing and I was like Rome, so I looked up the Rome thing and so be it. 25 places in the world named Rome. There are 18 places named
Wow.
Rome in America. You got Rome, Wisconsin, Rome, Tennessee, Rome, South Carolina, Rome, Pennsylvania, Rome, Oregon, Rome, Ohio, Rome, New York, Rome, Missouri, Rome, Mississippi, Rome, Maine, Rome, Louisiana, Rome,
Romaine? That sounds like romaine.
Rome, Kentucky, Rome, Kansas, Rome, Iowa, Rome, Indiana, Rome, Illinois, Rome, Georgia, and Rome, Alabama.
So I guess it's safe to say, oh, well, let me just say
I
this.
think
Okay,
I'm
go
not.
ahead.
Go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
No, I was gonna say I guess it's safe to say if I said I'm from Rome, I would not be lying. Cause I didn't say like people say that I'm, from the international Rome. That would be on them. I didn't tell. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. And, and there are also some international Romes outside of Rome, Italy. There are two places. There are two places named Rome in Belgium. There are Rome, Portugal. You got Rome in the Netherlands. You got Rome in Jamaica. You got Rome, Italy, and you got Rome in Indonesia. So you
Okay.
have 25 places in the world, and the city's name
Rome.
is Rome.
You know what? I honestly did not know that. I I knew that there was a Rome, but I was even wrong about that because it was Paris, Texas.
Yeah,
So as far as I was concerned, there were two, not 25.
yeah. It's always interesting to do a background of when you go to a city, like trying to figure out like why that city was named whatever name it is. And
Hmm.
it's always good to go and kind of dig. If you move to a new city, try to figure out the history behind it. Because I know you live in Austin, Texas, and do
Hmm.
you know why it's named Austin?
I don't really care.
See, you should, go look it up and let the people know.
By
But
Stephen F. Austin.
those have been my fun facts for today. Thank you, people.
Thank you, big kid. Look, I wasn't like too far fetched. I wasn't too, off the cliff with the your fun facts because I wasn't. Don't make that face because I wasn't. I said I did I thought it was, Rome, Texas. You corrected me and I left it at that and
A
yeah.
little bit. You were a little bit close. I give you some credit.
I know,
Half, five.
don't come on the show doing all that history stuff. You make people think, okay, dang, I need to brush up on my history.
I mean, I got an A in history. I got an A in history class. So what can I say?
I got an A in English. I guess that's why this show is so great.
So
Because I got an A in English, you got an A in history. KUTC Live. There you
I guess so.
go.
There it is.
All right. Thank you so much, Big King, for your fun
No
facts.
problem.
Now, so our guest today is a former director of the Center for Advanced Lung Disease and Lung and Heart Lung Transplant Program at Stanford Medical Center. His writing has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Salon, Newsweek, the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, the Hills. It just goes on and on and on. He has also been interviewed on CNN and by the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the Wall Street Journal. He is currently the principal of the Weill Consulting ICU and transplant care. Welcome to the show, Dr. David Weil.
Hi, Miss Tori. Thanks for having me. Hi, Ken.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Dr. Weil, I know we talked before the show, but again, I want to tell you that I'm really happy to have. Like I said, I know when your agent reached out to me for the interview, I knew that I had to have you on the show because what you do and in the past and what you are continuing to do, it's just really close to home right now. So again, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, okay, so I watched your interview on CNN about a young girl that got a long awaited lung transplant. and it was so touching. How common is it for children to be on the lung transplant list?
Yeah, it's getting increasingly common. There's not as many children that get transplanted in our country as adults, but there are quite a number that are getting transplanted, mostly for cystic fibrosis, which is an inherited lung disease that affects kids. And so most of the transplants that are happening in that age population are due to cystic fibrosis.
Now, from what I understand, and with this story, um, the little girl. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. She at first was turned down for a lung transplant because she wasn't old enough to get an adult lungs. Is that right?
Yeah, the difficulty in her case was actually finding a lung that was suitable for her. So the rules at that time dictated that only adults get adult lungs and kids get kids lung.
Oh,
But as we all know, some kids that are 12, 13, 14 years old are the same size as adults. And so it didn't make any sense to me. And I pointed that out during that interview that, if a kid needs a lung and the size is a good match, we ought to take adult lungs and
mhm.
transplant them into kids. And that's actually a policy change that resulted from that young girl's case.
Oh, wow. So it doesn't matter if a kid, if there's an adult lung that's available or a kid lung right now, a kid can, in essence, get an adult lung.
That's right. It's really a size and blood type issue when we're matching lungs. So if there's a 5'5" young girl who's 12, she can get a similarly sized adult lung from a 50-year-old,
Oh, wow.
as long as the blood type and size are appropriate. It works fine.
Now, I know I kind of jumped into this, but I just wanted to start the show with that story because it was extremely interesting. I think it happened, was that 2013 or 2015?
I think it was
13.
2013. Yeah.
Okay. Now, how did you even get into such a delicate field, of lungs and it just organs in general? Because that's,
Yeah.
man, that's, with every surgery, I know people are the people like us, we're putting our lives in the doctor's hands. Like, but how did you get into something like that?
Yeah, it was actually like a lot of things, it just happens serendipitously. I showed up for my internship in 1990 at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, and as it turns out, one of the upper level residents is somebody that would have been 5 years ahead of me in the training situation, got sick, and I showed up, and they needed somebody to volunteer to staff the kidney transplant service, and of course I shot my hand up and volunteered, and off I went, even though I had no idea what I was doing.
Oh my gosh.
And the first night, we actually transplanted a gentleman that I talk about in my book, and I saw that it's a miracle. I mean, we took a guy from Dallas that had not, peed naturally. I hope I
Wow.
can say peed on the
Yeah.
interview.
So yeah, that's
Um,
that's minor.
and we put a kidney, the surgical team put a kidney in this gentleman, and for the first time in 11 years, he's making urine the night of the operation. And I'm
Wow.
sitting there at the bedside. I'm, 25 years old, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, you got to be kidding me. I've got to do this. And ultimately, I didn't pick kidneys, but I picked lungs. But it was that night that I actually fell in love with transplant.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's just it's just man, organ transplant is something that I have never, ever, ever understood, and it's because the human body is just, oh man, it's just this, it's amazing. And what the thing that you can do to give someone a better quality of life just by taking out the bad and put it in the good. And so
I think that's
that's
something that
amazing.
people underrate. Like the typical things that we do on a day to day basis. Like you said, like use the restroom. I mean, most people don't even think about that, but the ability to do that after an 11-year, time span where you weren't able,
Yeah.
that's huge. That's a
Yeah.
huge.
I mean,
thing.
I've talked a lot about this lately, especially, but I mean, you can turn around somebody's life with an operation. And, in my instance, it's people that can't breathe. They've never run in their life. Kids that can't chase after the ice cream truck.
Right.
And with one operation, you can change the course of their life, and that's why I got so into the field.
So, you mentioned that you have a book. You have a new book called Exhale, Hope, Healing, and a Life in Transplant. I want to read a part of some of the memoir about your 10 years spent directing the lung transplant program at Stanford. Now it says a young father with a rare form of lung cancer who has been turned down for transplant by several hospitals, a kid who was considered not smart enough to be worthy of a transplant, a young mother dying on the waiting list in front of her two small children, a father losing his oldest daughter for after a transplant goes awry, the nights waiting for donor lungs to become available, understanding that someone needed to die so that another patient could live. Now, I know you were on the front lines of the transplant world, but how emotional was it to write this book?
It was very emotional. After I left Stanford, I had a lot on my mind, and wrote the first draft of the book in 6 months. So it all came sort of
Wow.
running out of me. And then, of course, I took 2 years to edit it with some help.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And, it was very emotional. I mean, I think the kind of work that we did it's very difficult in the moment to really realize when you're in the heat of that battle, the impact it's having on you and having on your family and the people around you. But as I wrote the book and the stories came out, I was like, man, what a
Yeah.
ride.
Yeah. So it was so was what was the inspiration to write the book? Was it because of everything you've seen in the last 10 years? Like what was your true inspiration to write the book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I kept a journal during my time working in the hospitals, especially my time at Stanford. And the journal entries ultimately became the book. And sometimes I just scratched a couple bullet points or a sentence or two. But all of these scenes that I write about in the book, I almost felt like I needed to turn to somebody that wasn't standing there and said, "Are you seeing all of this?" I mean,
Oh
it really is kind of amazing. And I figured since nobody was standing next to me, I needed to write it all down. And I thought that there might be some interest in reading the stories. So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I know that when I was reading excerpts of your book, I was like, there's no way that I could, you have to, I mean, you were on, like I said again, you were on the front lines, but just to kind of relive some of the stuff that happened, I said, this had to be emotional. I mean, it had to be. And, you know, there is this incredible high stakes world of transplant. Now, I've done some research, and one of the things that I didn't even know if it was true or not is that there is like this black market for organs. And on the black market, how safe are those organs?
Well, there's not good quality control, and I'm afraid that happens in places outside of the United States where there's not the same kind of regulations put into place to ensure their safety. And I've actually had the opportunity to visit China a couple times and try to figure out what's going on there. And it's disappointing what you hear about donations being derived, organ donors being derived from political prisoners
Oh
and
man.
oppressed groups within China and places like that. It's obviously very concerning to those of us in the transplant community. The United States, I think, has a fair and equitable system for distributing organs. It can at times be inefficient, but
Hmm.
it's fair. I think it's largely fair and equitable. But I think there's countries outside the U.S. where that's not the case.
Now, this is fairly new, but have you watched the movie the God Committee?
It's
Starring,
really interesting. Somebody actually, I didn't even know it was out, and then somebody yesterday
yeah.
said, "Well, you have to watch that." And so
Yeah.
I downloaded it yesterday, but haven't watched it yet. Have you seen it?
Yes, I watched it, and I watched it because, I was interviewing you, and
Yeah.
so I watched it about 2 days ago, and I kinda wanted to, keep some of the information, and one of the questions that I wanted to ask you without giving too much of the movie away is, um, how do you make the decision if there are 2 people waiting on a transplant, how do you make the decision to which person gets that organ?
Most of the time, the people that end up on our waiting list, and remember, there's a process to actually get on the waiting list. And, what I gather is being depicted in the movie is the selection of the candidates. And I talk about that some in the book too. We actually have a meeting that's called a selection meeting, which
Yeah.
I think it's kind of an amazing term because, it implies that we're just sort of saying you live and you don't.
Yes.
But in terms of actually getting the organ, once you've already made it to the waiting list, that's determined by medical urgency. In other words, how sick are you? The sickest people, whether it's a heart, lung, kidney, or liver, go to the top of the list. What
Hmm.
I've always found really interesting is how do you select the candidates to actually get on the waiting list in the first place?
Right.
And I'm afraid there are times when it's not all based on objective medical data. We're human beings making these decisions. So we bring everything that's human, the good and the bad, into those selection meetings. And sometimes subjective values and ethics and
Yeah.
judgments about other people come into that room. And that's always
Oh, wow.
that's always concerning when it happens, but I've
Yeah.
definitely seen it happen a number of times.
Well, that's sort of one of the things that was in the movie The God Committee is, you know, the person's not so bad, and you look at their future life and do they have kids, or they're gonna have kids. It was just amazing, and I'm like, I gotta ask Dr. Wild this. Is that true? Like, so what are
Hold
some of
on.
the oh, go
Well,
ahead.
since we're talking about that movie, I watched a show, and you might have seen it called The Resident,
Yeah.
and that show, focuses a lot on the surgical aspect of it, and transplants and things of that nature. Have you watched that show before?
I
And
have.
and
Yeah.
if so, how accurate are some of the things that you see in the show as far as being a real medical doctor and a real surgeon? Like
Yeah,
how
I think actually it's medically fairly accurate. I think what I've noticed about the TV shows over the years, and I started watching, programs a long time ago in the medical arena, from St. Elsewhere to ER to Grey's Anatomy, all of them. Um, I think they've gotten more and more accurate over the years,
Oh,
and I
wow.
think I think some of the TV shows, I think The Resident in particular, are using doctors to make sure that the information's accurate. So I think it has been fairly accurate. I'm sure, like every dramatization, they compress events and make it, much more urgent because in the hospital there's a lot of sitting around waiting for
Yeah.
something to happen.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
can't have that on a TV show, right?
Right. No, yeah, and a lot of the actors and actresses are really, really getting into their part these days, and really doing the research. Okay, did this really happen? Does this really happen? Is this like real? Is it going to be too cheesy, too fake? And so a lot of people are playing the Dr. Wiles, and just like, okay,
Right,
in a situation, this doctor told me he really did this to make
right.
it look real.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
you know,
my kids actually. I have one daughter in college and one in high school, and one's watching Grey's Anatomy right now for the first time. And
oh, wow.
she asked me the other day, "Dad, is this what it's really like in the hospital?" I said, "Sort of, but I said the people are a lot better looking than they are."
And then they are did you ever play that game, the little thing Operation, where you had to take the
Yeah,
extra little thing?
yeah, yeah. I did.
How good were you at that?
I was pretty good at that.
I was bad. See, that's why there's no doctor in front of my name. There's no DR in front of my name. No.
you were
Now, what? Now, kind of, on a serious note, so I had uh, told you before that I'm dealing with a family member that's going through lung cancer. And when you're in that situation, there always feels like there's this sense of urgency. And so I remember going to, talking to one of the doctors and saying, why can't there just be surgery? And, of course, there's a lot of medical jargon that was used, but what is it really difficult to have to not necessarily a transplant, but is it difficult to have to operate on the lungs?
Yeah, I think so. The consistency of the lungs are much like a balloon. It's delicate. It's difficult to sew on. I think that there's all kind of fragility to the lung. The other thing that's always been, I think, a little bit different about taking care of people with lung disease is the lungs, as we found out through COVID, unfortunately, are exposed to the outside environment constantly. Everything that we walk by, we inhale, and
Hmm.
so to keep lungs healthy is a bit of a trick. And there's susceptibility to infections, as we've seen with COVID, and there's a susceptibility to things that we inhale, and so it's really the only internal organ that's exposed to the outside world. And the skin is an organ as well, but it's not an internal organ in the way that the lungs are.
And you brought up COVID. How has
Yeah.
COVID changed things for you as a doctor? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, it's changed things a lot. During the spring of 2020, transplant activity essentially ground to a halt because,
Oh, wow, really?
yeah, and it was really concerning because we had obviously people on the waiting list that needed a transplant of all kinds, heart, lung, kidney, or liver. But the hospitals, first of all the hospital personnel was busy taking care of COVID patients. And secondly, you usually have to fly out to another hospital to get the organs. Well, that other hospital doesn't want a bunch of doctors from one
Oh my,
hospital going
wow.
into their hospital. So it essentially came to a halt. Fortunately, in the summer of 2020, it started picking up again, and now it's back to normal. And the one thing that I actually, feel like is happening, and I've talked about in a variety of settings, is the fact that many of the patients with COVID pneumonia are going to require a lung transplant
Oh,
because
wow.
they can't recover from their disease. And in fact, there's already been over 100 performed in the United States.
Of
So
transplants?
for lung transplants for COVID pneumonia.
Oh, well,
And
so is that considerably higher as compared to when it wasn't a pandemic?
well, in other words, so this is a new disease, COVID pneumonia, and the
Mhm.
lungs are not healing in a lot of the patients, and they're either stuck on a mechanical ventilator in the ICU, and the only way to get them back home again is to try to do a lung transplant on them. And
Mhm.
there's been over 100 performed. I think there are going to be many more because some of those people with COVID pneumonia are not going to recover their lung function going forward.
So someone, I don't know why they didn't send it to you, Big Ken, but someone sent a message asking Dr. Weil. Um, so I'm going to clean this question up. But the basically what they're asking is that with the pandemic, when you had to do the person has to get people have to get so many there are numerous lung transplants. Where are these lungs coming from? They're not just like stored somewhere. They come from.
No, no. All of our lungs come from brain dead donors. So people that have been in accidents or have had a neurological bleeding into their head or some kind of stroke. It's mostly accidents. Unfortunately, gunshot wounds, would fall into that category as well. So these are people that are technically brain dead, which meets the definition of dead. Legally and medically, and those people become organ donors. So that's where we're getting our donors from.
So what's the longest time that someone has to wait on the list on the organ transplant or the lung?
Yeah, it can be a year or two waiting for a lung, but the vast majority of the patients now get them in just 2 or 3 months, and that's because we've changed the way we allocate lungs in this country, and we've got it better at putting people on the waiting list when they really need the transplant. But we still don't have enough organ donors, people consenting to organ donation to take care of everybody on our transplant list.
Now, is there a reason why, or what's the reason why when people donate an organ, what's the reason why for the anonymity? Why don't you tell people who gave them that lung?
We actually do it this way. We tell them that there's going to be a time when they can reach out to the organ donor family and write a letter and say, thank you, and we appreciate that. I'm sorry for your loss. And then we leave it up to the donor family to determine whether or not they want to be in contact with the recipient. Some would rather not, and some would. And in fact, a lot of my patients became friends with the people that donated the organs to
Oh,
them.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
and that
yeah,
that was
that's
that was heartwarming to see.
yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. I watched so many stories, actual stories about that, and a lot of people, from what I've seen, it could have been just the stories, but it just seems like a lot of people or families want to know where that donor, uh, you know, organ came from, and then also the family wants to know who got that,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, as doctors taking care of transplant recipients, we're not allowed to tell the recipient anything about the organ
Oh,
donor.
wow.
Whether we can't even say whether they're male or female, black or white, how tall they were. We leave it up to the recipient to write a letter, anonymous letter.
Mhm.
Our social workers then get the letter to the organ donor, and we try to keep that separation unless they decide they want to come together. And then
Okay.
if that's what they both want, then it's fine.
Okay. What are some of the difficult decisions that come into play when considering a transplant?
Considering
Uh,
donation or receiving one.
um, donation. What's
Donation is very interesting. I write about this some in the book. I tell a story, one story in particular, about a black family that chose not to donate because I think there's been a tradition of mistrust
Oh,
about whether or
wow.
not you're actually trying to save their loved one, or do you just want the organ to save the person on your waiting list.
Oh, wow.
And I tell that story within the book because I think it's a profound statement about where we are in healthcare in America.
Mhm.
And this kind of distrust has been rampant, and it's justified in a lot of ways that we can talk more about. But organ donation is about a 50-50 proposition. So in other words, if I ask 100 people, in a brain dead situation, if their family member could donate, only about half will agree to it. And
Really?
yeah, and it's impacted by socioeconomic status. It's impacted by race. It's got all kind of societal issues within it that I
And
think.
I never would have thought about that. I think the thing that I would think is that more family would kind of be like, "How dare you ask me that?" Not I didn't know that there's a whole trust factor that goes on, like
Yeah.
this.
Well, I mean, I think the trust comes in because, when we talk about brain death, a lot of times in brain dead people, the heart's working, the lungs are working, the kidneys are working, but the brain's not working. And that meets the legal definition of dead. But I think families see that and they say, well, why can't you just save my loved one? I don't
Right.
understand. And I don't think we've done a good job over the years explaining to folks that brain dead means dead.
Mhm.
And we've just not done a good job of that at all. And despite a lot of efforts, I think, in that regard.
I
Yeah,
got a
no, I've
question
seen.
about
Oh, go ahead.
probability of uh, organ rejection. Like when you go through the whole process, you pick a person, you get a set of organs, and you want to transplant them. How often do you get cases where the person's body rejects those organs?
Yeah, that's a good question. It happens actually fairly frequently after transplant, but it's usually reversible and easily treated. Where we get into difficulty is when a process called chronic rejection happens, where we can't control it with medication. And in fact, it becomes so severe that sometimes patients require a second transplant, or they go back to living like they did before they got the
Oh,
transplant,
wow.
or they die. And so there's, the immune system is very complicated. It's very hard to trick it. And that's essentially what we're doing with the medications.
Oh
We're trying
man.
to suppress the immune system. It's a very sophisticated system. And rejection is still common after our procedures.
So is
So
that
when
what
a
happens with that when you have a rejection? Is that the body the antibodies trying to attack that quote unquote foreign organ?
That's exactly right. What happens is that the immune system is recognizing that new heart or that new kidney is foreign, somebody else's, and it sends all the troops in to go after it. The immunosuppressive drugs that we give after transplant are made to dampen that response, but they don't do it entirely, and they don't work perfectly.
so when someone gets when they get a transplant, are they on medication for the rest of their lives?
They are, and the medications are powerful. They have their own set of side effects to them, but the patients are on them for life.
I don't know if I saw this in a movie, so don't just,
No judgment.
yeah. So is it I saw that when someone gets a transplant that it can sometimes cause your skin to itch.
Yeah, yeah. So there's something called there are rashes actually associated with organ rejection, most typically in something called graft versus host disease, and that's most common in bone marrow transplant, not as much in solid organ transplant, which is heart, lung, kidney.
Okay.
It's more
Okay.
common in bone marrow transplant, but you're right. It actually causes amazing itching, like the kind of itching you can't get under control easily.
Oh, wow. So, on I want to talk real quick about positive stuff. Like, what are some of the most successful and miraculous transplants that you've experienced in your career?
The field was amazing. It is amazing in so many ways. I mean, we return people to their loved ones, all the time. They got back to, hiking mountains, skiing, going back to their jobs. I had, unfortunately, a lot of patients that, especially young kids with cystic fibrosis, that jumped out of airplanes after their
Oh
transplant.
my God.
I never could figure out what about getting a transplant made you
Yeah.
want to jump out of a plane. But I had patients. I attended marriages of transplant recipients. Weddings and anniversaries, and I have a box full of pictures of people doing the most incredible things after a transplant. But what patients, and I always ask them before the transplant, well, what do you want to do after the transplant? And most of them just want to go back to living. They want to do whatever it is that they
Yeah.
want to do. And for some people, that meant a lot. They had a lot of ambition. But for other people, I want to play golf. I want to chase my grandkids. I want to hang out. I had a lot of sports fans. I want to watch a ball game.
Yeah.
Simple stuff that we always take for granted, but
Yeah.
I don't take it for granted anymore.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, one of the things that I want to ask you is that I know that no matter how many transplants you do, it doesn't matter about the organs, there's always something that requires change or requires tweaking. Is there something about being in the organ transplant field that you need more of or more aware about?
Yeah, there's two things, and they're kind of related. One is we need to get more people to consent for organ donation, and we need to break down societal and cultural differences among us to try to get that done. And the other thing we need is we need to distribute the organs more equitably. I wrote a Wall Street Journal piece about a year and a half ago saying that I'm not sure that there's an organ donor shortage in our country. I think instead we're not using the organs that are available. So it might surprise the listeners to know that every single night, every day, there's organs that are wasted, that aren't used, that could be put into somebody else just
Wow.
because of the logistical problems of moving the organs from place to place. We've got to change that.
Oh, wow.
I
Well,
have a question
oh, go ahead.
before you get out of here. I'm gonna take it back a little bit because I'm always curious to figure out like the motivation behind what people do. And okay, you're at your point now. You're doing these amazing things, but what were you planning on being as a 12-year-old, as a kid? Like, what kind of things were you thinking that you were gonna do with your life?
I wanted to play quarterback for the Saints, but if you saw me in person, you would quickly figure out that that wasn't possible. But at 5'9". So, I actually, when I was in high school, I started working in hospitals as an orderly. They had orderlies back then. I don't think they have them anymore. But I started working in hospitals when I was a kid, and I used to look up to the doctors that were there because I saw the way they could change lives. And, it became addictive, quite frankly. I mean, people telling you that you saved their lives, it's pretty heady stuff. But as much as I wanted to be a sports star, I tried to find another way to help people, and that's all I really wanted to do. So for me, I didn't think about a lot of career options. For me, it was always going to be in medicine.
Well, that's amazing to me because that just means to me that you're passionate about that, and you started as an orderly, so you're one of those people who got a chance to work their way from the ground up, technically. So you got a chance to see it in different iterations. So that's awesome.
I cleaned a lot of bedpans. Yeah.
You got crawl before you walk.
That's right.
I know we talked to you before the show started, and I want to tell you that I had to keep my hands like this up underneath the table because I'm like, okay, I'm not going to ask him anything. So I just talked to you. I didn't want to ask you anything that was going to make me look ugly on camera. So so
You fulfilled your mission. It was a beautiful conversation. Thank you.
but I really, really, I can't thank you enough because I know that I ask you a lot of questions. And I know you have this amazing book out, Exhale. But the one question that I ask you about a family member, I want to let you know that you really made me look at it different because before I was not angry, but I guess confused and not didn't understand certain things when it came to the lungs. And I think that a lot of times when you're dealing with sensitive stuff, uh, God bless doctors. I know that they try to be really, really aware of family, and so they don't tell you all the. I'm not saying they don't tell you, but they put it
Yeah.
in a way that it just instead of saying we just can't do it, they put it exactly like sort of how some doctors put it like how you did. But the thing that I love about what you did was you made it clear. I wasn't like confused like I was before because I just not understanding like why. It's kind of like a little kid when you ask a question, when they ask you a question, you give them an answer, they still don't, but why?
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for clearing the disappointment in doctors. And
Yeah.
I'm always transparent. And so I want to thank you so much. And you are an inspiration, and you are the reason that the word hope even exists. And so I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It meant a lot to me, and I know, of course, to our viewers and Big Ken as well.
Thank you both. I really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate all of what you said.
Thank you. And Dr. Weill's new book can be found anywhere you buy books. Excel, Hope, Healing, and Life in Transplant. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is so amazing. I mean, I know I was being silly, but honestly, like I didn't want to be on this show like emotional
Mhm.
because what Dr. Weil did in the past and what he continues to do forward, even with his book, is really, really touching, especially if families are going through, um, a situation where they need a transplant, where they need a lung transplant. You don't want to read the book. You don't want to hear what anybody else has to say. You want to be healed, and you want that person that's ailing to be healed. And
Yeah.
so he put it uh, so it was a lot of class.
Yeah.
Um, the way
And I mean,
you
I think that's the
Mhm.
biggest thing when you have situations like this, which could be life or death, to have people that educate you and make you aware of certain things and, give you a little bit of comfort and ease going into the situation, whether it's you or whether it's a loved one that's in this situation, to have that information going into it makes the situation a whole lot better. And I think he did an awesome job of explaining these things. And for me, I'm one of those people, like I said, I look at The Resident all the time. I look at every episode, along with other shows. So that aspect of it, the surgical aspect of it, is intriguing to me. But he gave it another light of, okay, this needs to be made aware of. These things are
Yeah.
cool. TV shows are cool, but this is a real issue that we're having, and that's the donation of the
Mhm.
organ. So that's another thing that needs to be made aware of. That
Yeah.
yeah, put that information out there.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I think that people can be just like me or just like anybody else. You just ask. You ask if you feel if you are in a situation or someone is in a situation. I mean, it kind of sucks, and I want to put it mildly, but where you can help save somebody else's life,
Yeah.
uh, ask questions, and if you genuinely feel comfortable, uh, doing that, then do it because you know that life saves a life, like Dr. Wall said, it really in that situation takes a life to save a life.
I'm
And
not gonna lie to you. I was one of those people who was like, I crack jokes all the time, but this is a joke. Well, it's a funny story. I was one of those people who was like, no, I'm not donating anything. I don't want to be a donor because in my mind, I was like, if something happens to me, I'm brain dead. Maybe I might come back. So if you take my lungs and I come back, then maybe I might need my lungs back. So what's gonna
that
happen if
makes yeah, but that makes sense. You know what? That makes
that
perfect
was the
sense.
way I
That
was thinking,
Yeah.
So the fact that a lot of people don't understand that when you're brain dead, because I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, the figures or anything like that with possibility of somebody coming back from being, brain
Brain
dead,
dead. Yeah.
because it has happened before in a
Hmm.
sense. Like people have this false sense of, okay, maybe it'll happen in my case, which I mean, I'm not an expert to say it will or won't, but that's the mindset behind it. Well, I don't want to give my organs away because I'm gonna need them when
Right. Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
or my loved one when they come out of this, they're gonna need them.
Right.
So, and those are things that we just have to, tread lightly on when we're dealing with people, but also, make ourselves more aware and do a little bit more research when we
Yeah,
have
research,
gone through these
definitely.
things. Yeah.
Definitely research. I know that a lot of, even in doing research, I still feel that family, they look at the sentimental part of it where they're burying a loved one, but I'm burying him without his lungs. And they can't quite wrap their mind around that, oh, so and so is buried with no lungs. I'm not going to do that. He's going to have all of his body parts. So, I mean, all of his organs. So instead of, you know, saving a life, like Dr. Weil said, there's so many wasted organs, that could go to save someone. So I'm with you, Big Ken. I think that if you don't know what you don't know, so you need to do research, ask questions like I did. I know that I could have had Dr. Weil on here and ask him a ton of questions because I just want to know. But honestly, the one question he cleared up. He made it clear because when you're going through stuff sometimes and the doctors are talking to your family, all you hear is wah, 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 and all these medical terms that just, you don't want them. It's like I was telling Dr. Wall, you want them to tell you like it is, but they're saving you some type of emotion.
Yeah.
So I'm
They don't
glad
want
that
to unless it's positive.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm definitely glad to have Dr. Weil on the show. Hopefully, people are watching and will do more research. Well, I know they're watching, but do more research.
More
Anyone,
research,
yeah,
and when you get your driver's license renewed, go ahead
yeah,
and click that little box so you can
the
save someone.
donor. Exactly. Yeah. All right. Remember, you can catch KUTC Live right here on Facebook every Wednesday at 7 p.m. We end the show with a positive quote, and this week's quote is: wherever you go, No matter what the weather, always bring your own sunshine. Until next time.
Sunshine, not moonshine. Okay.
Moonshine.
Sunshine, not moonshine.
Anyway, until next time.
All right. Keep up the conversation.
Peace.
Bye bye.